We're gathered here today to remember a bunch of people who had the misfortune of suffering some of the weirdest deaths in history. And our story begins with Hans Steininger. Hans was a mayor in the town of Braunau am Inn in the 1500s, which is now part of Austria, but also happens to be the birthplace of one Adolf Hitler. While Hans may have been well known among the townspeople for being their mayor, he was even more widely known for his extremely long beard. It was reportedly longer than 2 meters in length and went down past his feet. Most of the time, he'd keep it rolled up and tucked away in his pocket for practical purposes. But one night in 1567, Hans noticed something outside his window. A fire had broken out and was burning through the town. Like any good mayor would, Hans rushed to get outside and help put out the fire. However, in a hurry, he'd forgotten to tuck his beard away and accidentally stepped on it, causing him to fall downstairs and break his neck. And although Hans had died, his legacy lives on in the District Museum Herzogsburg in Braunau, where his beard is preserved and proudly on display. And so here lies Hans Steininger, the man who was killed by his own beard. Rest in peace, Hans. Next up on the list, we have a man named Aeschylus. And for this story, we're going all the way back to ancient Greece. Aeschylus was a Greek playwright in the 5th century BCE. He's widely considered the father of the tragedy, but ironically, the father of the tragedy's death would actually be rather comedic. In 456 BCE, Aeschylus travelled from Greece to Sicily. One little known fact about Sicily is that the vultures on the island like to feed on tortoises. They do so by scooping them up and dropping them from a great height to smash open their shells and feast on their insides. You can probably see where this is going. When Aeschylus arrived in Sicily, he was probably looking forward to having a nice little holiday. Oh boy, Sicily! I can't wait to unpack my bags and see the sights. This is going to be so much fun. Aeschylus was killed by a tortoise falling from the sky and landing on his head. Here lies Aeschylus, father of the tragic play and the comedic death. Another one bites the dust. Speaking of biting, our next comedically killed cadaver is a man who died in a teeth-related incident. This is Sigurd the Mighty. Sigurd the Mighty was a Viking who ruled over Orkney and the Shetland Islands, north of mainland Scotland in the 9th century CE. Like any good Viking, he would regularly sail over to the mainland and raid Scottish villages. But on one particular raid, he attracted the ire of one Pictish chief, named Mael Bricta the Buck-toothed. You can probably work out how he got that name.
Oi, laddie!
Who, me?
Aye, you. Square go, big man. Mon, square go.
Square go? What is this strange language he's speaking at me? I don't know, sir. I think he's drunk.
That's besides the point. Look, you, me, 40 minutes, we're gonna have a fight. Then you're gonna piss off back to your islands.
I just about understood that part. Okay, Mr. Bucktooth, you have yourself a fight. But it seems that Sigurd didn't understand that part. Or rather, he chose to ignore it. Because while Mael Bricta the Bucktooth turned up with the agreed upon 40 men, Sigurd the Mighty turned up with 80. He made his men ride 2 to a horse, so as to not give away his numbers as he approached the battlefield. Until it was too late. Unsurprisingly, the massively outnumbered Picts were slaughtered by Sigurd and his Vikings, and Sigurd chopped off Mael Bricta's head for good measure. Sigurd took Mael Bricta's head back home with him as a trophy, but as the head swung back and forth, Mael Bricta's big old buck teeth scratched and cut Sigurd's leg. By the time Sigurd had returned home, the scratch had become infected, and Sigurd died. So, if there's something we can learn from the unfortunate demise of Sigurd the Mighty, it's that you should never brush your teeth, just in case you get beheaded by one of your enemies and want your teeth to avenge you. And for all you nerds out there, don't come at me about the horns. I know they're not historically accurate, I just think they look cool. Here lies Sigurd the Mighty, the man who died after being bitten by a severed head. And while we're on the topic of small victories for dead men, that brings us to Erechtheion of Phegalia, taking us back to ancient Greece. Arikion was an undefeated champion wrestler in the 6th century BCE. In 564 BCE, Arikion was defending his title at the Olympic Games. However, things weren't looking good for the champion, as his opponent managed to get him in a headlock. But like all good champions do, Arikion fought back. He wrapped his feet around his opponents, then yanked back.
Whoa! I surrender!
Arikion had managed to snap his opponent's leg, causing the challenger to signal to the judges that he conceded. The ancient Greek version of tapping out. However, because Arikion was in a headlock as he performed the maneuver, as his opponent recoiled from the pain of having his leg snapped, he unknowingly snapped Arikion's neck at the same time, killing him on the spot.
And still, the undefeated champion of the world, Arikion of Vigalia!
Oh, come on! Despite having died, because his opponent surrendered, Arikion was announced the winner. Which meant that Arikion's undefeated legacy would forever remain intact. Rest in peace, Arikion of Vigalia, the man who won a wrestling match even though he was dead. And that brings us to our final fallen soldier in this remembrance service of weird and wacky ways to die. Here lies Bobby Leach. Bobby Leach was a daredevil with a dream, and that dream, rather bizarrely, was to become the second person to ever go over Niagara Falls in a barrel. The stunt had already been performed in 1901 by Annie Taylor, but 10 years later, in 1911, Bobby decided it was high time somebody did it again. A small crowd gathered to watch as Bobby loaded himself into the barrel and floated towards the falls. As he reached the edge, Bobby plummeted down 50 meters and he survived. Bobby successfully became the second person and first man to go over Niagara Falls in a barrel. That is, if you consider 2 broken kneecaps and a fractured jaw successful. In his 60s, Bobby looked at the Niagara whirlpool and thought to himself, I reckon I could swim across that. Spoiler alert, he couldn't. He tried several times, but had to be rescued. In 1926, Bobby was on a publicity tour in Auckland, New Zealand. But as he was casually walking down the street, Bobby slipped on an orange peel and broke his leg. His leg became infected and needed amputating. Sadly, Bobby died due to complications during the surgery. So, there we have it. Although Bobby might have only been the second maniac to throw themselves over Niagara Falls in a barrel, he almost certainly was the first and only daredevil in history who died by slipping on an orange peel. Sleep well, Bobby. And that marks the end of our service. If there's one thing we can take away from these amusing anecdotes about some of history's strangest deaths, it's that you never know how or when you're going to die. So we should make the most of what time we have left. Until the next video, I'm off to doom scroll through funny videos on my phone and worry about things that'll probably never happen. Thanks for watching.